Great to meet you. My name's Claire Enterline, and I represent one of the hosting programs. And I'm realizing that you all might not be seeing that, but hopefully you are now again. So this is a webinar series brought to you by the UN Ocean Decade programs, Blue Food Futures, Fisheries Strategies for Changing Oceans and Resilient Ecosystems, FishSCORE, SUPREME, which stands for Sustainability, Predictability, and Resilience of Marine Ecosystems, as well as the SmartNet program, Sustainability of Marine Ecosystems through Global Knowledge Networks, and also the program FishMIP, Fisheries and Marine Ecosystem Model Intercomparison Project, and lastly, the project BECI, which stands for Basin Scale Events to Coastal Impacts. And this webinar series highlights the current efforts and challenges at the Climate Fisheries Nexus, and presentations and discussions will range from data-driven efforts to better understand oceanographic and biological changes affecting fisheries, to how results can be used to inform fisheries management, aquaculture, and sustainable food decisions, and the many ways that people and broader communities are being impacted by and adapting to changes in marine ecosystems and marine resource use. So thanks for joining us very much. I have a couple of our co-hosting programs on here as well. Laura Anderson from Blue Food Futures and Kelsey Roberts from the BECI project and FishMIP, and they'll be helping to facilitate. And I think one of them is going to be putting into the chat more information about each of our programs and how to connect with us. So with that, we'll move to our webinar for today, which is looking at sustainable blue food systems in a changing climate. And our first presenter will be Karina Higa, as a marine ethnobiologist and educator with a rich professional background spanning government, education, NGOs, and the private sector in Brazil, Australia, Japan, and Italy. She brings a transdisciplinary approach to her work, specializing in EU fisheries, ocean governance, and policy analysis. Currently, she's developing policy tools for the implementation of the EU Nature Restoration Law and Marine Protected Area Managers. Additionally, to her work in ocean advocacy, ocean literacy, and grant writing, Karina is highly skilled in multilateral cooperation, project management, and curriculum development, with expertise in facilitating events, crafting joint position papers, and revising international framework implementation plans at the Science Policy Interface. So excited to have Karina, and I'll let her share her screen.
So hello everyone, can you see my screen?
Yep, we can see both the big screen and then the little sidebar.
Okay.
Bar.
Yeah. Now, so yeah, good morning everyone. Thank you, Claire, for the presentation and for the invitation as well. So my name is Karina Higa. I'm part of the EPAL program. So, and I'm co-lead of the ocean literacy testing. So today I'm going to present my master thesis and a little bit of one of the projects the ocean literacy testing is leading at the moment, related with policy engagement. So the title of my master thesis is The Influence of Non-State Actors on the Blue Food System Policies, focused on the small-scale fisheries in the Western Mediterranean Sea. So, but to start off, I would like to get to know each other. So I would like to know who is attending this webinar today. So I don't know if you guys know Slido, but it's an interactive platform. So you can access slido.com. And once you open the website, you can join by adding the code 20825264, or you can scan the QR code. So I will see where you are from. I know, and the first question is, what's your background? So let's see if you guys can access that. So everyone could access that. So I have only one answer right now. Fishery science, yeah, it makes sense. What else? I will give you one more minute. Sustainable food system, marine science, farm to school, environment science. Okay, environment science, adaptation. Yeah, I would like to know if you are a researcher as well, if you work for private sector. You could add that. Business sector, yeah. RFMO, this thing, working as a policymaker. Okay. So yeah, thank you. So now I'm going to share again my screen. It's good to know your background. So yeah, here. Yeah, so in my presentation, I'm going to answer the question, how do policies impact the small-scale fisheries and the blue food system? So I'm going to point to the policy gaps in the EU fisheries policy, especially regarding to small-scale fishermen, the lack of representation and the equitable access to the resources, and the need to have a more democratic and inclusive mechanism of participation in the blue food governance. So as you can see here in this picture, in this illustration, there is the small scale fishermen, and the big boat represent the industrial fisheries. So to access all the benefits that the law has, the small fisherman needs to go through a long way. So, and on the way, they need a helper, kind of helper, which to access the benefits, which we call the lawmakers, the informal lawmakers. So these lawmakers, they are represented. We can give an example of them. It can be the environment angels that do the bridge the gap between small scale fishing communities and the policymakers. They push the political change by initiate some actions, influence agenda set, moderation in negotiation, funding mobilizations, and represent this community in decision-making spaces. So here is the overview of the evolution of the European fisheries policies, which is part of the food policies, food system policies. Since the beginning, the management of the resources was in community hands, but over time, it has changed for a more technical approach, using more technical metrics. And the policymakers realized that this kind of approach didn't give much access to all the stakeholders. So they create some mechanisms and spaces of participation to have all these communities to be engaged. However, this asymmetric power relation shows that there is a cultural gap. That's why small scale fisheries, they could participate because they don't speak the scientific language, the scientific language, or the decision-making language. They speak their own language that sometimes they want to express and share their knowledge, but these kind of language are not validated, or knowledge are not validated. Now, to guarantee effective participation of these communities, these no-state actors such as the environment NGOs in collaboration with other stakeholders such as the scientific community, they try to fill this gap of the participation, provided some service to the decision makers by providing scientific research data, by providing policy recommendations, create some advocacy campaigns, by providing legal actions to support the communities, building coalitions and networkings, and monitoring the enforcement of the laws. So yeah, the failures in the current government system impact the non-democratic distribution of the fishing opportunities. And this is due to many factors. For example, the lack of political will to change, or the lack of capacity to enforce or implement the regulations, for example, at the national level, or the lack of accountability from the fishery industry. So in my research, I identified 6 policy gaps in the Common Fisheries Policy 2013. That was the last one. Now this policy is reviewed each 10 days. So this year they are going to launch a new one. So yeah, my research was carried out last year. So these are the 6 gaps I found in the policies. The NGOs advocate for the fisheries right, which is the fair access to fisheries resources, to secure fishing areas, to have more access to public funding, and to have fair access to markets, etc. So, and these state actors, these NGOs, they act in the food system since the production. Now, one of the examples is the fishing ground access. They advocate for that until the post-production to have a more market and funding access. They provide different support to local communities. And to achieve a sustainable food system, the small scale features, they are really important because they're important for the communities. And they promote more sustainable methods and practices. So, but however, if you want to have a more sustainable food system, we need to have a basic needs, small scale fisheries needs and rights met to support all this food system, to have a more sustainable food system. Otherwise, it's difficult. So just to show one of the examples of this collaborative work of the non-state actors between environment NGOs, fishing communities, and scientific communities is the example of the Spain Canary Island advocated for fishing quotas. So the traditional fishermen struggle to have the quotas due to the overfishing impact for industrial fleets. So with the support of the NGOs, they open legal action against the government to ask for more quotas, for them justifying that they have a priority because they use more sustainable methods. So, and with all these actions, these collaborative actions, they got the result was the quota adjustment, and they could reshape the quota policies. So for the blue food system to change, it's a structure, it's a really rigid and fragmented structure. That's why it's not work to be done by the government, but from different actors need to work together to have this transformation. The non-state actors, they work, for example, the environment NGOs, they work closely with the communities, promoting more democratic, how do I say, practice. And this practice could serve as an example and to be incorporated in the policies to create more mechanisms to support the key actors to participate. And based on democracy, legitimacy, accountability, and inclusiveness, to have a food system transformation. So now I would like to ask you again to access the Slido. And I'm curious to know, okay, all this work these non-state actors do, and especially the environment NGOs, is a lot of work, right? So what kind of professional skills do you think these people have acting as non-state actor in the society, science, and policy interface? Yeah, I would like to ask you to access our Slido again for the next question. So everybody has the access again? Or do you need the numbers and the scan to scan?
The number is in the chat again, if folks can access it through there.
In the chat? Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit slow on that. This is the code. It's like phone. Okay, facilitation skills, start negotiation, empathy. Yeah, that's cool. What else? I will give you one more minute. This question. Communication. Wow, many. Analytical skills, diligent, communicative and facilitation skills, stakeholders engagement, collaboration. Yeah, I will give them one more second before to close this. Ethical system thinking. Persistence, yeah, for sure, persistence and passion. Be very passionate. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answers. And in fact, based on your answers, okay, and the Ocean Literacy Task Team carried out a survey on the skills needed for policy engagement. And in fact, we confirm most of the answers you guys respond in the poll. Yeah, is the same. Yeah, we need a multidisciplinary professional that which is a good communicator, who deal with very well with people, can establish a network, work in collaboration, yeah, this kind of things. So, the next slide. Yeah, it's just not working. Just one moment. I will start it again. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
No.
No, yeah, I think it's frozen.
There it goes.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, yeah, why the blue food policies are that matters now? Because they are very important for the sustainability of the resources, the marine resources, and the food security for many countries. As we know, like there are some developing countries, they rely heavily on the blue foods for livelihoods to survive. So if you don't have a blue food policies in place that guarantee sustainability and the voices to incorporate the community voices, the livelihood are at risk. So yeah, I would like to reinforce the role and of the non-state actors, especially the environment NGOs, and also the leaders of tomorrow in shaping these policies. Now, for example, the leaders of tomorrow, such as youth and ECOP, to bring the principle of the inclusiveness and the importance of the voices of the communities to reshape these policies. Thinking of that, the Ocean Literacy Task Team created the Ocean Literacy Blue Citizenship Project. So it's a pilot project that want to address the skills and opportunity gaps in the policy engagement by early career officer professionals and youth. Might provide a training course and basic principles of ocean literacy, net training course, and also we would like to developing awareness campaigns to say people out there, okay, your participation matters, and it can impact heavily in the ocean health and the blue foods that you eat every day. Nah. So, and we would like also to create opportunities for these professionals to have a hands-on experience to the policy engagement. So, and the main takeaways of my presentation is to show the importance of the non-state actors in shape the blue food policy and the importance of the inclusiveness in the policy engagement. And the need of the multidisciplinary skills and to have an ocean literate citizen engage in shaping all these policies for the sake of our society. So yeah, so okay, the last question I have for you, once again in the slide, is how you, in your capacity, could support or get involved or influence the blue food policies. I'm very curious to know. So I will share again the results. Yeah, I open the next question. Let's see what you have. What's your answer about that? Research on potential policy solutions by using social media to get word out. Research on potential. You cannot see my thing, sorry. I will share it again. Yeah, now you can see it. Participate in hard discussions. Yeah, I'll give you one more minute to have more answers. That's a tough question, I know. Understand the needs that could be better addressed by environment NGOs in the space and make connections with ongoing and emerging researchers. What else we do have? Yeah, for a few seconds. Okay, let's participate in public sessions of management groups. Okay, so yeah, and here I finalize my presentation. I just want to leave this reflection to you, how we could, as a professional, ocean professional, could be more involved and maximize our work in towards the sustainability, ocean sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Karina. Really appreciate your work. Thank you. And we have about 5 minutes for questions for Karina right now. So we'll open the floor. You can either raise your hand. A good signal is also to take yourself off video, or post your question in the chat for us to read and share with the group. So. Karina, I have a question. I have a question about how you would answer that question. So yeah, how would you support and in all of your work suggest additions to our work that we do in the different sectors that everyone gave into blue food policies, and does it differ based on different areas?
How you could support?
Yeah, or become engaged in.
Okay. For example, the NGOs, they always need some data to provide, to make some reports to support some causes, okay? So, and the scientists, for example, scientists could try to provide, okay, to facilitate the data access to these NGOs, or try to make the data more readable. Because, for example, for scientists, it's really, okay, you are familiar with that language, it's easy, okay, for you to understand, but for common people, the science language is really difficult. And for us to translate all this data is kind of difficult. Né? It needs to be very accessible. Né? I think this is something we need to think about, né? The data, we can provide the data. This is but in a readable way. Né?
Yeah, thank you. And we have a question from Angelina Economos. And Angelina, I can either read it or you can take yourself off if you would like to ask the question yourself.
Okay, how can we develop our ocean literacy? Yeah, I think ocean literacy, yeah, that is a tough question because we need to analyze many factors. It's not easy. But I think, for example, Angelina, what's your background? Are you working with research? Not yet. Okay, because how we can develop our ocean literacy. I think we can start by collaborating with people that were initiatives that develop ocean literacy, and try to understand the principles and how we can incorporate our capacity, our knowledge to that framework. So we're starting like that, because you by yourself and your institution is really hard to start from scratch, but like in collaboration with people that already work with ocean literacy, it's a good start to develop a program or initiative to integrate the ocean literacy.
We probably have time for one more question. We'll also have time for questions at the end as well for both of our speakers.
I can jump in with a question, and it's a bit connected to what you were just chatting about with ocean literacy. I'm curious, sort of for folks who want to get involved with the ocean literacy work that you're leading, what would be the best way for them to do that? Is there kind of a website with links to things? Do they reach out to you directly? How can people get more involved in your ocean literacy work?
Yeah, you can send me your email and we can start the conversation. Yeah, for now we are working on the website. Yeah, so for now, just reach me out with email.
Great, Karina.
Sorry, I will leave in the chat my email.
That's great. And if you have a website to put up there, there is one more question for you in the chat, but we do need to jump to Laura's presentation so we can maybe answer that over the chat, Karina, or we can revisit it when we get back to questions at the end.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. So I'll introduce our next speaker, Laura Anderson. Laura Anderson's the Engagement Project Manager at the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions. Her primary focus is research and policy communication, supporting the Center for Ocean Solutions team and partners in communicating research, insights, and policy settings. She also supports the Blue Food Futures Program, a UN Ocean Decade endorsed program. She was previously a communications associate for the Blue Food Assessment, a collaboration with the Center for Ocean Solutions and Center on Food Security and the Environment at Stanford University, and the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University, and EAT. Laura, maybe you could tell us more about that. The floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. Let me share my screen. Okay. Well, thanks, y'all. And it's fun to be kind of on the other side of the aisle right now, after sort of being a host of some of these joint webinars. So very grateful to get the chance to present today. As Claire mentioned, my name is Laura Anderson. I'm the Engagement Project Manager at the Stanford Center for Ocean Solutions, and grateful today to have the opportunity to present about a recent report on integrating blue or aquatic foods into national climate strategies. This was produced by the Center for Ocean Solutions, WorldFish, FAO, the Bear Institute for Ecological Economics, CARE, and the Environmental Defense Fund. The report focuses on nationally determined contributions, though the policy options can also be relevant to other climate strategies and even things like nutrition policy or health policies. To provide some brief context on NDCs, though, nationally determined contributions, or NDCs, are national climate action plans required under the Paris Agreement. And NDCs are intended to share how a country plans to reduce their emissions and take climate action. The next round of NDCs is due in February 2025, which really creates an opportunity for countries to be thinking about how they want to take climate action. And in this case, thinking about how fisheries and aquaculture might play a role in those plans. We know that aquatic foods are a really important part of global food systems. Karina touched on some of the reasons why. More than 40% of the world's population depends on blue foods as a source of animal protein, and these foods are also rich in essential micronutrients. And while blue foods have been increasingly recognized on the global climate agenda during the annual ocean dialogues and most recently at COP28, there's been little concrete action to integrate these foods into climate plans like NDCs. We know that blue foods face diverse climate hazards, from shifts in species distribution to things like sea level rise and drought. As you can see from this 2021 analysis done as part of the Blue Food Assessment that Claire mentioned, climate risks are different in different regions. And especially when considering where people depend on blue food benefits the most, much of Africa, South and Southeast Asia, and the Indo-Pacific are most exposed to high climate hazards. Blue foods generally have a lower carbon footprint than terrestrial animal-sourced foods like beef, with considerable variation, though, across different species, geographical regions, and farming practices. So it's important to consider that with more than 2,500 species or species groups of blue foods, the type of species and the types of production practices make a big difference when it comes to emissions as well as nutritional quality. Some researchers from the Center for Ocean Solutions and WorldFish are analyzing the level of inclusion of keywords like fisheries or seafood in the 2020 NDC submissions. And as you can see from the figure on your screen, there's considerable variation here. 73 countries have high inclusion of blue food keywords. 37 countries have low inclusion, which indicates that the keywords were only mentioned vaguely or as part of a list with many other sectors. And 84 countries did not mention blue food keywords at all in their NDCs. I would say this does not mean that countries who have not included blue foods in their NDCs are not considering climate in their fisheries management efforts, but rather it really highlights an opportunity for these countries to better incorporate those types of efforts into their broader climate plans. And so the motivation for these guidelines is sharing what that could look like, offering diverse entry points for blue foods and NDCs and other climate strategies. They're intended to be a starting point for setting targets and developing policies. We've organized the policy options gathered among the different partners as well as other experts into 5 thematic intervention areas that you can see on the screen. And for each policy option, we provide a brief description, offer potential concrete measures and example targets. assess co-benefits and trade-offs between adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development outcomes, and also share some practical examples of these policy options in action. So I won't take you through the details of every single policy option, but I'll take you through the 5 intervention areas and highlight a few policy options along the way. So we'll start with capture fisheries production. Capture fisheries have always been a key component of the global food system, with production levels fluctuating through the years and reaching around 92 million tons in 2022. In 2021, however, an estimated 37.7% of marine fish stocks, that's about 1 in every 3 fish stocks, were below biologically sustainable levels. Climate change is likely to make the situation even worse, and so actions really need to be taken to build the climate resilience and sustainability of capture fisheries. For this intervention area, we identify 3 policy options. The first, sustainable management of fisheries can really enhance their resilience to climate change, and fisheries management needs to adapt to changes in species productivity and location. The second policy option, adopting low fuel gear and transitioning to low impact fuel efficient practices, can help to improve the efficiency of fishing operations, and transitioning to hybrid or fully electric vessels can also help cut emissions. And the third, fisheries are among the most climate vulnerable sectors in the world. And so in addition to adopting climate adaptive fisheries management, it's important to implement measures that enhance the resilience of both fisheries and the communities that depend on them. So I'll take you through one of the policy options for capture fisheries production. Sustainable and climate adaptive fisheries management can ensure the health of fish stocks and the ecosystems that support them. Healthy stocks and ecosystems are also more able to cope with climate impacts and changing environmental conditions. And so some of the concrete measures to achieve this policy option include establishing community-based monitoring programs, introducing flexible management tools, and strengthening collaboration with neighboring countries to manage fish stocks that would move across borders. In this policy option, we highlight 2 examples. So the first is an early warning system to support climate resilient fisheries in Chile, Peru, and Ecuador. And the second is an effort led by the U.S. National Marine Fisheries Service to assess the impacts of climate change on the Bering Sea ecosystem in Alaska. Second intervention area focuses on aquaculture production. Aquaculture has become a cornerstone of blue food production, especially in recent years. For the first time in 2022, aquaculture production surpassed capture fisheries in aquatic animal production, representing 51% of the world's total. And as aquaculture expands, strategic planning, investment, and resilience building measures are really essential to reduce emissions, as well as aquaculture's vulnerability to climate change. For this intervention area, we identified 4 policy options. The first focuses on feed. Feed accounts for up to 90% of the environmental impacts and carbon footprint of farm fish production. So it's really an important policy option to consider when considering the environmental impacts of aquaculture. Emissions from feed production vary significantly, though, depending on the species and the production system. The second focuses on energy use, which is the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in aquaculture after feed. The energy demands of aquaculture, again, vary based on production intensity. The third policy option is on farming of non-fed species, such as seaweeds, bivalves, and filter feeding finfish, which currently make up about 1/3 of global aquaculture production. Non-fed systems can help to offer climate benefits because they generally produce lower greenhouse gas emissions and require minimal input compared to many fed production systems. And the fourth policy option we identify, climate change poses challenges to aquaculture, productivity, sustainability, and profitability. And so supporting the adoption of climate adaptive technologies and practices will help to increase aquaculture's long-term resilience to climate impacts. And I'll focus on that policy option for our deep dive. Some concrete measures to achieve this type of policy option would include strengthening capacity for climate-informed decision-making, incorporating climate risk assessments into aquaculture spatial planning, and implementing climate-resilient infrastructure. And we found two case study examples that we highlighted in the guidelines. The first includes efforts by the government of Bangladesh to develop digital climate information and advisory services for farmers. And the second is a project focused on water-efficient aquaculture technologies in Egypt, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. Turning to the third intervention area, blue food supply chains play a key role in global food supply, with 89% of aquatic animal production in 2022 consumed by humans. Aquatic foods are the most traded food products globally. And in general, aquatic foods are highly perishable, so good handling and preservation practices are really needed to avoid both food safety risks as well as spoilage along the supply chain. And this can be achieved with facilities such as cold storage and refrigerated transport, as well as rapid delivery services to consumers. And as I've mentioned before, the sector is highly diverse, which can result in challenges in tracing the environmental impacts of production along the supply chain. For this intervention area, we identified two policy options. The first, in 2021, the world lost around 23.8 million tons of edible aquatic food, representing just under 15% of the total production. So reducing loss and waste and enhancing circularity can help to improve both efficiency and minimize the environmental impacts of blue food production. The second focuses on reducing emissions from energy use and operations. Emissions estimates often focus on blue food production, but that can overlook the considerable climate impacts of post-harvest activities. So transport emissions, for instance, particularly for fresh products, can be as high or higher than those from production. To dive further here, it's important to transition to renewable energy sources, shorten supply chains, and promote more sustainable modes of transportation. Localizing processing in developing regional markets can also help to reduce transportation-related emissions. So some concrete measures to achieve this policy option include creating incentives for investment in renewable energy-powered equipment, establishing energy efficiency standards for blue food facilities and equipment, and investing in domestic processing infrastructure. And we share two examples in the guidelines. The first, the FAO Blue Ports Initiative, which is an example of how blue fishing ports can serve as hubs for sustainable development. And the second is an innovative processing technique for fish smoking and drying that is more energy efficient. So in addition to interventions on blue food production and supply chains, we also find potential to make blue foods part of climate solutions through consumption in diets. Blue foods are not only an important source of protein, they're packed with essential micronutrients as well, such as calcium, vitamin A, vitamin B12, and omega-3 fatty acids. And this means that they can play an important role in improving food and nutrition security, especially for children and women. And many aquatic foods, such as small pelagic fish and bivalves, combine high nutrient density with a low environmental footprint, meaning that they can offer potential win-wins for human and environmental health. For this intervention area, we identified two policy options. The first, integrating sustainable blue foods into diets through public programs can significantly improve nutritional outcomes. So integrating low carbon options into food programs can also reduce the carbon emissions associated with diets by replacing high emission foods with more sustainable low emission alternatives. And secondly, the high diversity of aquatic foods means they vary in their impacts on climate and biodiversity, and as well as their potential for providing nutritional value. However, these sustainability and nutrition dimensions are often not transparent to consumers and other supply chain actors. So increasing consumer awareness of sustainable blue food options can support both sustainable practices and as well as local production. I'll focus on some of the food procurement planning and assistance programs, which can be especially important in countries with higher rates of micronutrient deficiencies or diet-related non-communicable diseases. Concrete measures to achieve this policy objective include revising national dietary guidelines to include recommendations for the consumption of diverse, sustainable, nutrient-dense blue foods, incorporating sustainable low-carbon blue foods in national food assistance programs, and increasing the capacity for data collection and analysis on aquatic food consumption to inform policy decisions. And in the guidelines, we highlight two examples, including homegrown fish in school feeding programs in Angola, and preventing food waste in the United States by diverting it to the country's largest food bank. Let's see if I can get to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Perfect. The final intervention area that we identify covers the interaction between blue foods and the environments that they are grown in, especially carbon-rich habitats such as mangroves, seagrasses, and tidal marshes. These ecosystems store more than 30,000 teragrams of carbon and provide important ecosystem services such as nursery habitats for fish and coastal protection, which is increasingly important with sea level rise and growing storm intensity. However, over the past 50 years, 50% of these ecosystems have been lost, making restoration really essential. And there are some great examples of guidelines about how to incorporate blue carbon habitats into nationally determined contributions. So our hope was to complement some of those guidelines with ideas about blue foods. We identified 2 policy options to hopefully complement some of those other reports and examples out in the world. The first one concerns destructive fishing practices such as bottom trawling or anchor damage, which can release large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. So addressing the impacts of aquatic food production on blue carbon habitats can help to preserve these ecosystems and their role in combating climate change. And the second one involves effective management, protection, and restoration of blue carbon habitats. So including blue food management strategies in blue carbon planning can help to optimize these benefits, ensuring that efforts to mitigate climate change are aligned with those that support sustainable and resilient aquatic food systems. So as I mentioned before, certain aquaculture and fishing practices such as blue bottom trawling and destruction of mangroves for shrimp farming can have really negative impacts on blue carbon ecosystems. Shrimp farming, for instance, has led to the loss of nearly 2 million hectares of mangroves globally, with additional damage from effluent discharges from intensive farms. Potential measures to help to reduce the impact of aquaculture and fisheries on these habitats include enforcing sustainable fishing practices, implementing zoning regulations for aquaculture farms, and establishing monitoring programs to detect invasive species. And in the report, we highlight 2 projects focused on implementing sustainable shrimp farming practices, one in Vietnam and one in Indonesia. And finally, our report highlights a series of enabling measures, cross-cutting measures that will enhance the effectiveness of the policy options we've discussed so far. So the first, additional research and development is needed to reduce the uncertainties and knowledge gaps associated with each of the intervention areas. This can also help tailor climate solutions to local and regional needs. The second, data collection, monitoring, and prediction systems can help provide accurate, often real-time information to inform decision-making. These data-driven approaches can help to lower the costs of implementing interventions and improve their long-term success by, again, reducing uncertainties. Third, we know that social inequality, including gender inequality, is one of the root causes of climate vulnerability. So improving equitable access to financial resources, knowledge, and government support builds resilience in blue food supply chains and helps communities adapt to climate change. And finally, small-scale fisheries and aquaculture producers, indigenous peoples, and women have all been marginalized in discussions about sustainable and equitable food system transformation, despite being really central to it in many contexts. So by incorporating diverse perspectives, including local and indigenous knowledge, governments can develop solutions more tailored to specific contexts. Let's see. So I'll just highlight and kind of take a closer look on enabling measure number 3. So examples of ways to improve equity in each of the intervention areas include, for capture fisheries, supporting the development of social protection schemes for fishers. For aquaculture, ensuring that government support programs reach the most climate vulnerable farmers. For supply chains, developing gender-sensitive policies that promote equal access to technologies, markets, and other blue food benefits for marginalized value chain actors. For consumption and diets, that could look like developing policies that subsidize the cost of sustainably produced blue foods to make them more affordable for low-income consumers. And for blue foods and blue carbon ecosystems, that could include providing training and resources to local communities to strengthen their role in managing and protecting these coastal ecosystems. So I hope this presentation is giving you a taste of the diverse ways in which aquatic foods can be included in national climate strategies for climate adaptation and mitigation. And as I stated at the top of the presentation, the February 2025 deadline for the next round of NDC submissions is really an opportunity for countries to develop more concrete measures to address the climate impacts on aquatic food systems, as well as leverage their potential for climate action. So hopefully the policy options and resources provided in this report will be useful for those discussions. This is the link to the full report and my contact information as well. I can also include the link in the chat, and I'm happy to take any questions about the report or other things. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was a great presentation. See, we already have a question. Raise hand from Mark Dickey-Collis.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, Laura. Hi, Laura. Thank you for that. I think your presentation was outstanding, and the work of all of you has done really, I mean, it's just amazing. I have two questions. The first one is, you gave the picture of the blue foods in the NDC, which you said was ongoing. That's that figure. Is that around? Can we use it? Can we cite it? Or as it says in progress, I assume not. I think it's a very interesting figure.
Yeah, it's in progress. It's in the NDC guidelines report.
Oh, it is in the report. Okay.
Yeah, and I think there, to my knowledge, although this is not concrete yet, but to my knowledge, there'll be sort of an update on this as the 2025 NDCs come out. So perhaps it would also be of interest to you sort of perhaps in the coming year that in addition to this look at and snapshot of the 2020 NDCs, there'll be kind of an updated effort to look at what's the change in 2025. So happy to kind of have you cite the guidelines, but this is sort of ongoing work that will continue to be updated over the next year.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. My second one's a little more contentious.
Okay.
You cite in the report the destructive fishing practices, the bottom trawling and carbon, etc. This is a really contentious issue. And I'm quite surprised to see you say it so strongly that bottom trawling and anchors play such a big role, considering the controversy around that debate. Is the evidence strong enough to make that statement, is what I'm saying?
That's a fair question. I think, and I would preface this with, I am not a blue carbon ecosystem expert. So I think that my knowledge of the nuances of that debate are perhaps more limited than yours. I think that one of the things that we sort of highlighted or tried to take into account in sort of bringing together these guidelines, we're thinking about not all of these are going to be relevant. Not all of these are going to be relevant in all contexts. So I think that there is evidence that some of these fishing practices can have a big impact on blue carbon ecosystems, and especially in certain areas. And so I think that, hopefully not a cop-out answer, but I would say like the important part would then be countries looking at the evidence in their specific context and decide whether, whether some of these measures about destructive fishing practices are relevant in their context. So that would be my kind of short, perhaps wiggly answer, but I think it's kind of whenever you're trying to put together something that can be relevant in lots of different contexts, there are going to be areas where it's not. So I guess I'm not as familiar with the specifics of the debate, but that would be my kind of initial attempt.
Thank you very much. And hello, everybody from CBD COP. We're having a great time.
Thank you, Mark. And Laura, you had a follow-up question for the figure from Michelle Hardy. And Michelle, I'll read it, but feel free to jump in as well. Does that figure reflect the terminology keywords that might not be used in some documents but still discussed?
So short answer, no. So the way that the analysis worked was looking at particular keywords and then doing kind of a search through documents of those keywords. So I think that when you do an analysis like that, you miss certain pieces. So perhaps discussions of potential policy options that don't mention fisheries, but kind of discuss it in other language wouldn't necessarily be flagged by an analysis like this. I think there, for some countries and some examples, there was kind of a deeper dive into like the NDC itself and thinking about, okay, how were these keywords used? But it doesn't catch sort of paragraphs of nuanced language that don't necessarily include the keywords. So that's kind of part of the analysis, but certainly something that kind of in the future can add a little bit more of that nuance.
You got a thumbs up in the chat from Michelle, so I think she understood the answer. And I'd like to open it up to questions for both of our speakers right now. We had a lingering one from Jasper earlier that I think probably applies to both of you, so I'll go ahead and read it. Have you engaged in any lobbying on Capitol Hill and with other national or international interactions? And if so, what are your messages that you could share in terms of the significance of ocean literacy? And Jasper, feel free to jump in and clarify your question or engage.
So yeah, I can. So yeah, I haven't, because I work with, I don't work directly with the government, but with UNESCO and establishing international frameworks and how to support the development of ocean literacy at the national level with local organizations, especially NGOs. So the importance of the ocean literacy is to change the relationship of humanity with the ocean. The literate citizen is the one that know about ocean, but care about ocean and also act for the ocean. So, and to understand all the influence that ocean has in our lives. This is the main message of the ocean literacy. Yeah, hopefully I answered the question.
Thank you. Yeah. And as for the other presentation, what kind of messages would you care to share in terms of policy implementation and kind of beelining that process? What would you hope to see in that?
Oh, I think it could be relevant for either of us. I'm happy to jump in with some thoughts, and then Karina, I'd be curious your thoughts on this as well. I think, and we had a series of regional webinars about the guidelines to kind of think about in regional context, like what might be some of the more relevant policy options. I think things that came up regarding implementation was often funding. So sort of with some of these policy options, it will take investment to do, especially when you think about infrastructure development for some of kind of cleaner energy systems. So I think that's sort of one of the pieces on implementation. And I think the other is some of, and I think the kind of blue carbon space, this has been one of the challenges, but also one of the focus areas over in recent years is sort of how you measure kind of carbon emissions and kind of avoided emissions. And so I think that's an area as well when we talk about some of the enabling measures, like having the ability to do that and to kind of measure emissions and measure reduction of emissions is, I think, something that particularly in the context of NDCs is really important. So I think some of these policy options, figuring out what target would allow a country to measure tangible action, I think is an area that could still have some focus, and I think is maybe not as clear cut as some other sectors. So especially with some of the policy options, so I think those would be my top two. Karina, you may have other thoughts on policy implementation and what that can look like.
Not in policy implementation, but I mean like how we could be more engaged. Yeah, I think in this sense, I think all the ocean professionals they have somehow to collaborate and influence the policies. I think my role here is just to make you reflect how I could get involved, how I could contribute more for the ocean sustainability. I think all of us can do that. And yeah, this is my main role, just to make some question marks to your mind.
Thank you so much. And we're at the top of the hour. Thank you to all of our attendees, and a big thanks to our presenters, Laura and Karina. And Karina has put her email address in the chat. And Laura, I don't know if you want to quickly put anything in the chat for people to learn more about what you were presenting or to get in contact with you. I've also put in the chat a link to where the presentation recording will be posted in a couple of weeks or less. If you go to gmri.org/FishSCORE 2030, you can easily find it under events, or there's the direct page there. Thanks so much for your participation. We'll have another monthly webinar towards the end of November, and that'll be a little bit more focused on ocean modeling, and we hope you can join us. Thanks, everyone.